talk tonight, we're going to super focus on type 2 diabetes and some of the common myths that I encounter in my practice every day, and try to, help patients unlearn some of that, and kind of get them on board and updated with the latest in nutrition. And interestingly, it is not that this research is new. It's been there. If you spend the last 100 years of data looking at different types of research, bench research to population research and everything in between, it has been there consistently. But there has been a lot of mixed messaging in the last few decades, and that's what creates a lot of confusion. So I'm going to try to help break some of those myths tonight. And um, without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen so I can start. So right way into it, the first myth that I see all the time that is so ingrained in patients from years of messaging by their, from what they hear in the media, from online forums, for many times physicians, dietitians, um, that carbohydrates are the reason why they have type 2 diabetes. And they should be really scared of anything that says carbohydrates. And that's not true. Okay, I cannot emphasize enough that carbohydrates are not the cause of diabetes, but the quality of the carbohydrates is what makes the difference. So if you have started wondering what am I saying, I'm not saying that eating cookies, candies, and cakes is healthy, and that's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is complex carbohydrates. Carbohydrates that are naturally found in the foods that the nature provides us, which comes with a lot of fiber. And actually, we cannot actually think of food as just macros. So thinking of food as, okay, this is for fat and this is for protein and this is for carbohydrates, it puts us in this macro confusion and complicates things further, because the way nature has designed things, there is fat, protein, carbohydrate, fiber, minerals, vitamins, and water, seven different nutrients in each food that the nature provides. And yes, there may be one portion or one nutrient that is more dominant versus the others. So trying to put food into fat, protein, carbohydrate category, we are kind of really missing the whole essence of nutrition, and getting mixed up. So as you see it on that plate, colorful plate on the corner of the screen here, a whole food plant-based plate. The word whole is very important. You see, the again goes back to fiber rich form of foods. Eating an apple versus an apple sauce or without any added sugar versus apple juice. Let's say we have 100 calories of apples, pieces of apples, 100 calories worth of apple sauce without any added sugar, and 100 calories worth of apple juice. All three of them will be metabolized completely differently because of the content of fiber and how much processing has been done. So the apple will be the best because it has not been processed and the fiber is intact. So you have to actually chew it, break it down. The stomach has to do its job, the intestine has to do its job, and then that sugar finally gets to the liver in a very slow fashion. Versus applesauce, yes, it still has the fiber, but it has been cooked, so it is a little bit easier to break down and absorb. And the apple juice has no fiber whatsoever. So when you drink apple juice or any fruit juice for that matter, you are literally getting a big spike of glucose and fructose released into your bloodstream, which ends up to the liver. And that's the only organ that can process fructose, which is the sugar from the fruits. So making sure when you're focusing on fiber rich foods, that's the key. Fat accumulating inside the cells causes insulin resistance. You may have heard this term a lot. That's the cause of why we see type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes or PCOS or high blood pressure to some extent. that is coming from insulin resistance. What it literally means is the insulin that your body is making is not being processed. So your body needs to keep making more and more insulin, and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do at the liver level and the muscles. And you reach a point where your body cannot produce more insulin, but you're not getting the effect. And that's where you start with pre-diabetes and eventually diabetes. So buildup of that fat molecules in the liver cells and animal protein, those two factors can actually lead to insulin resistance. And eating foods which are naturally high in fiber, although they may be also high in carbohydrates, are beneficial in reversing that insulin resistance. We don't have to be scared of carbohydrates, but the quality of the carbohydrates is very pertinent. So, focusing on wholesome foods like you see there, fruits and vegetables, you see lots of beans and lentils, you see whole grains. That's the type of plate you should be eating. You don't have to focus on macros, but you have to focus on foods which are naturally dense in fiber and the nutrients that comes with that. So I think I have drilled that topic so far. Going on to the second one that I hear all the time again, eating 6 small meals a day is not optimal. You've been told, or you may have heard, or you may have read it on the internet. If you have diabetes, you should be eating small meals frequently. I'll give you an analogy. Let's say we have a very high-end sophisticated machine, and we will put that machine to work 2 hours at a time, 3 times a day, versus second scenario, we put it to work 2 hours at a time, 6 times a day. Which scenario is going to give you longer life on the machine and better efficiency? It's going to be the first scenario where you are only putting it to work 3 times a day for 2 hours versus that 6 times, which is going to be too much. So that's the same concept with our body. Every time we eat food, the body has to produce insulin, because not just for carbohydrates, any food that the body has to break down, insulin is needed for its metabolism. So you need insulin for carbohydrate metabolism, you need it for fat and protein metabolism. So insulin is needed nonetheless. Now the proportion of insulin can vary depending on the type of food you eat. Lesser the fiber in the foods, more insulin is released. Higher the fiber, fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, lesser need of insulin. And also, the more amount of time the insulin is exposed to the body, the more effects you get. The growth effects you may have seen when people have diabetes or high triglycerides, which is a type of fat in the blood. They start getting skin tags, or they start getting blackening of the skin on the side of the face, or on the elbow or back of the neck. Those are all signs of insulin excess. When insulin exposure to the body increases, you start seeing those effects. So we want to limit how many times the body gets exposed to insulin. And that can be done by having 3 proper meals, maybe one fruit snack before dinner through the day. And you don't need 6 meals a day. And there are studies which have actually been done head to head, comparing 3 meals, well planned meals, versus 6 meals a day. And your blood pressure, your weight, your BMI, your sugar numbers all do better when you eat properly, but enough at a meal and less times a day. So it is very important to focus on the quality of the food and also the frequency of the food intake. And if it works in your schedule, it is good to have a good breakfast and decent lunch and have a smaller dinner. Now, some people don't feel hungry in the morning. That's okay. If you're the person who doesn't feel hungry in the morning, you have a bigger brunch as the middle part of the day, and then you have your next meal after that. So working on eating more calories in the middle of the day versus adding more calories in the evening hours plays a big role. because our body doesn't metabolize food the same way at night or evening hours versus the daytime. Also, we are less active in the evening hours. We tend to go to sleep in is very soon after meal. So it is important to focus on eating majority of your foods, obviously focused fiber rich foods in the earlier part of the day, middle of the day, and go down as the day fades into the evening. I do want to go back onto my first slide and focus on saying this again, that this plate that you see there is kind of a goal to work towards. It is not about perfection. You will hear more from the health heroes maybe later tonight and the next session on June 11th. But the idea is to not perfect everything. The idea is to create progress mindset and keep working on adding more fiber rich food. So if you're not eating any fruits and vegetables, you start having one fruit and one vegetable every day. Next week you add two. Third week you add more. So, and then if you're not eating any beans or legumes, start with half a cup a day, then go to 1 cup a day. So progress is the goal, not perfection. And as you start eating 70-80% of your foods coming from whole plant foods, you start seeing benefits in your diabetes, and you start seeing improvements in your insulin resistance, which can then help create a path for lowering your medication requirements. But you want to make sure you work with your physician to do that in a safe manner. The third common myth that I encounter is fruit is bad. I cannot eat fruit, and people wanting to stay away from fruit. And on top of that, when they do eat fruit, they are told that they should eat fruit with something that is high in protein and fat. So they're typically told eat a piece of fruit with cheese or eat a piece of fruit with peanut butter. Well, the issue is when you eat foods which are high in fat and protein, especially animal protein, you will find that you create more insulin resistance. Meaning, first scenario where you just eat a whole apple, cut it up in pieces and eat that without adding anything to it. Maybe a sprinkle of cinnamon or black pepper is great, but no other foods. And that absorption in glucose and fructose absorption is very steady. Versus if you add cheese or peanut butter with that, now that fat in those foods will 100% be absorbed, and it will actually interfere with the uptake of glucose and fructose by your body. And so you see a bigger spike of those sugar numbers right after you do that combination. So if the idea again is to eat enough. If you just eat half an apple, you're not going to be full. But if you eat a whole apple, if you're really hungry, you can eat two apples. But as long as you eat enough of fresh fruits without any extra added fats or protein sources on top. And keep in mind, fruits also have protein. You may feel surprised, but yes, fruits also have a little bit of protein. There is lots of carbohydrates, there's lots of fiber, vitamins and minerals, but there's also a little bit of fat and a little bit of protein. So you don't have to eat protein or fat extra on top of the fruit. You just want to make sure you eat enough fruit at a time that you can get the benefit and be full from eating it. So making sure that you're eating the fruit by itself and not mixing it up. And what I do personally and also advise my patients is usually we tend to overeat in the evening, maybe from the stress, or we didn't eat enough in the morning, which, as I said, ideally we want to eat more in the daytime. But one of the quick hacks to make sure you don't overeat at dinner time is to make sure you have at least 2 to 3, maybe 4 servings of fruit. One serving is half a cup of fresh cut fruit, about 30 minutes to an hour before dinner time. What it does is, one, the fruit is absorbed and processed quickly without getting any interference from other foods. And second, your hunger and cravings go down. So when you eat your dinner, you're not going to overeat and end up going for more high fat and high sugar type of foods, because your body is not in that craving mode anymore. It is more steady and the fruit has nicely processed and all done with. And the last, again, the myth that I also encounter quite a few times is, oh, diabetics cannot do intermittent fasting or cannot fast. Well, doing water fasting that is more than 72 hours has to be medically supervised for anybody. And especially if you have diabetes, you should talk with your physician, make sure they can make appropriate changes in your medications for you to, do the fasting. But again, the key is not perfection. The key is to start. If you're not fasting at all, if you're eating something before going to bed, you are clogging up your liver for a night shift, which it needs really to focus on detoxification and cleaning of the body. So trying to make sure that you eat in the middle of the day majority of your calories. One good timeline that I usually try to follow and tell my patients as well is eat between either 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. depending on your schedule, up till 6 to 7 p.m. So if you do 10 to 6, you get an 8-hour feeding window with 3 meals and a fruit snack, and you can easily have 16 hours of no food overnight. And again, if you're on insulin, if you're on any medications for diabetes, you do want to talk with your physician, make sure that you have a plan to reduce them the days that you do that, so that you don't end up with low blood sugars overnight, because we don't want that. But it is very much possible for diabetics to do intermittent fasting, and it is actually beneficial for diabetics to do the fasting and for anybody else as well, because we really need a daily routine where our liver and the body can focus on cleansing itself. We have that mechanism by nature, we're just not letting it do its job. If we eat late in the night, if we stay up late at night, we interfere with that detox schedule. So trying to make sure that you do not eat after 7 p.m., not even a piece of fruit. Once you finish your dinner, you should stop eating and at least have 3 hours of no food overnight. That will, 3 hours of no food before bedtime, so that when you go to sleep, your stomach should be all empty. It should have processed the food you ate, and it should already be into the intestine and doing, what it needs to do further. So if you allow the liver to do its job, the liver will start healing, the insulin resistance will go down, your sugars will start improving, you'll start losing weight, you will feel better, you will need less and less medications. And in many cases, you can completely reverse your type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. So fasting is a very essential part of the healing routine, but you have to make sure that your medications are appropriately adjusted so that you don't end up with low blood sugars. So with that, I'm going to end with my last slide, two quotes. As Ayurveda always says, if the diet is wrong, medication is of no use, and if the diet is correct, then medication of no use is of no need. And Hippocrates has always, mentioned that we have the strongest and the greatest healing power and force in the world. Our body has that capability. All we need is to give it the right environment with the right food, the right mindset, the right sleep routine, the right activity, and avoiding toxins as much as possible. So, thank you.